Let's see. You're all set with that?
Yes.
Great. Not on the TV. Jim Buzzell is going to be doing the North Brookfield portion of the library presentation, and whenever you're ready, Jim.
Yep.
One other thing that I am supposed to mention, we have a 130-year-old building, and the roof is gone. We need help with the roof, so we have a GoFundMe page. So if anyone would like to contribute to help us take care of that, our roof, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Jim Buzzell. I know some of you, I don't know some of you. I'm glad that there's this many people that are interested in history. Always glad when there's people interested in history that'll come to hear me babble. So we're going to start talking about this library and how it began. Erasmus Haston was approached in 1890, or he approached, I should say, North Brookfield in 1892 about making a donation to have a public library built. The 1870s, 80s, 90s was a prosperous period in America, industrially, but also intellectually. It was a sort of a renaissance, a period of enlightenment, and this percolated all the way down to small towns who wanted to find ways for their citizens to learn more things and better themselves. And so public libraries really blossomed. If you look around most of the towns in this state, that's the period where they were built. The libraries in the towns surrounding us, we were kind of late to the party. West Brookfield, Brookfield, Spencer, and Barry already had their libraries in place. And they all had benefactors who had much more means than Erasmus Haston and his wife. Sugden in Spencer was a wire factory owner. West Brookfield had the printer. Brookfield had the state court district judge, and Barry had a very successful businessman. So you could see where they would have the means to be able to contribute that kind of money, whereas Erasmus Haston was a farmer and a shoemaker at different points of his life. And so the big question always becomes, how did he do it? How did he get this money where he could contribute? So when I first looked, $30,000 was his original contribution. The project, when completed, was actually about $46,000. And depending on what segments you read, he either gave a little bit in addition to the $30,000 up to all of the extra money to make the $46,000. So I don't know where he ended up. But I looked at that number 30,000 and I thought, well, that doesn't seem so bad. I could probably take some money off my 401k, and it wouldn't kill me to be able to do that. But when you look at $30,000 in 1892 money, it works out to over $1 million, just over $1 million in today's spending power. So a farmer and a shoemaker was able to donate $1 million. So we're going to work our way through this and try and see how he was able to pull this off. So let's see here. So 1892, he donated that first money. The building went into construction, was completed in 1894, and they had a major dedication. They couldn't do it in this library because it wasn't big enough for the people that were going to be there. They couldn't do it in the townhouse because that wasn't big enough for the amount of people that they had that wanted to go to this dedication. So the Bachelor Shoe Factory in town had a big warehouse. They cleared all their stock out, decorated the inside. The space inside that building was about the same as Mechanics Hall. They had over 2,000 people there for the dedication, and there were hundreds of people that couldn't get in because there wasn't room. So the gentleman pictured here is not Erasmus Haston. That's Theodore Bates. He lived on Bates Street in the farmhouse across from the Wendemith barn for some part of his life, but he wasn't really a farmer. He was a politician. And where there was a speech to be given, Theodore Bates was there. And so he was the keynote speaker for the dedication to this library. And Erasmus and his wife Elvira were guests of honor. They didn't speak, but they were spoken about by Bates and some of the other speakers. And some of the words he used to describe how Erasmus Haston was able to acquire his finances was industry, frugality, and economy. Industry in the sense that he was a hard worker, not in the sense that he was an industrial manufacturer or anything like that. Basically, when you read through the other sentences of his speech, his premise is he saved. He didn't spend where he didn't have to spend, and that's how he ended up with this money. So, okay, but still $1 million doesn't seem like farming and shoemaking will get you there. So I still had the question, and we're going to work through and continue on here. This is the welcome to North Brookfield. Most people know this. When you came in on East Brookfield Road, you see this. I took this because it sort of describes Erasmus. In the center is the shoemaker emblem, and he certainly was involved in that shoemaking industry. We'll talk more about that in a bit. On the left is the apple tree. He was a farmer and he loved his orchards. I don't know if he liked boating or if he was ever on Brooks Pond, but down the bottom, the town of North Brookfield was incorporated in 1812, and it strikes me that that's the year he was born. He was born about 2 months after our incorporation. And so when you come into town and you look at the welcome to North Brookfield signs and you see the 1812, think of Erasmus Haston. But he wasn't born in North Brookfield and he didn't live in North Brookfield. He was born in Belchertown, lived on a big farm that his parents, Philip and Rebecca, owned. And he had 6 siblings. And I grew up on a farm, so I know how much fun it can be to live on a farm where you have open meadows and woods to climb trees. And we used to wade through the brook. My cousin Sue's here. She probably remembers all that. But a great way to live. So I think about what a nice childhood Erasmus must have had with his siblings to be able to cover that area. That's the Swift River, which ran right next to his farm. All right. So great childhood, maybe, but his mother, Rebecca, passed away when he was 2 years old in 1814. So you can imagine the bonds that probably formed emotionally between mother and son in those 2 years and how difficult that must have been for him at that time, the questions that were probably arisen. Rebecca, with a K, was his one connection to North Brookfield. So she grew up in North Brookfield. There were plenty of rangers. Look on the old map. Sometimes they were spelled with the I and sometimes without. But she was from North Brookfield. So when she died, Erasmus's grandparents were still living here in North Brookfield. He had uncles and aunts here as well. All right. 5 years later, his father dies. Erasmus is 7 years old. He's an orphan. His father, Philip, apparently it wasn't like a sudden heart attack or got stomped by a bull or anything like that. He obviously knew that the end was coming near for several weeks because he made out his will 2 weeks before he died. And from looking at that will, which is online and very interesting to see, they didn't have too much. His oldest son, Erasmus' older brother, Tim, got the lion's share of what was worth anything, which was the family horse and Philip's rifle. The girls got like $8.70 a piece and their mother's clothing. And Erasmus was left one item in that will, a trunk. So when we think about, how did Erasmus end up with all this money at the end of his life, we can scratch off inheritance from his parents. All right. The one thing that Philip did have that was worth some money was his land. So his farm in total was 332 acres in the south of Belchertown. And it took 3 years of going through the courts and getting to the point where they could put it up for auction. Was sold for $1,712. Philip was a little bit unusual for his decision-making in this time. because most of the time with farms, all the land was left to the oldest son. But Philip decided he wanted to split the land up equally between all of his children. So in the end, Erasmus's share was $244. So he's an orphan. Now, early part of my research, spoiler alert, at 28 years old, he's in North Brookfield. But at age 7, when he becomes an orphan, I don't know where he goes. I want to know who raised him, where did he live, what was his life like at that point. Anybody that's done genealogical research knows that when you go through the federal census records in the early 1800s, before 1850, only the head of household was listed. After 1850, they would put, no matter how young, all the names in each household. So in 1820, I can't find him. And it's a little bit frustrating for me. And I'm thinking, well, we're just going to have to go to at age 28 and move on from there. But eventually, I found a couple sources to find out where he was raised, and then more information came from that. So again, his father, on his deathbed for a few weeks, was able to make out his will. He was also able to line up what he thought would be the best living arrangements for his children. And for Erasmus, he assigned him a farm that was in the same area where they already lived, in the south of Belchertown. And it also abutted the Swift River. So Erasmus had that constant in his life. He lost his parents, and he also, in a sense, lost his siblings because none of them went with him to this household. But at least he had the Swift River still, and he was close to his old farmland. All right. All right. So, and as another consequence of being in the same neighborhood, he was able to go to the same school. The schoolhouse that he went to, he was able to attend for about 3 months out of the year, which I guess was the fact for a lot of young boys back then, working the farm most of the year. Wintertime, you got those months where there's not such a demand for farm chores, and they could go to school, and that's when he did. And presumably that's where he learned to read, as later in life he became an avid reader, which was, I'm sure, part of the rationale behind wanting to donate the money for this library. So the couple that he was assigned to that became his guardians were in their early 20s. They were recently married. Their name were Timothy and Martha Works, and they had no children at the time. The connection for the family is kind of interesting because they were not blood relation of Erasmus. I was thinking, before I found the information with this connection, that this would have been the perfect time for him to make his way to North Brookfield, since he had so many blood relatives here. But apparently his father deemed that this was going to be the best situation for him. So Timothy Works, who was his new father guardian, was the nephew of Philip, Erasmus's father's first wife, and apparently a close family friend. So here we go into the 1920s. Erasmus is growing up. He is an only child at first, but then he becomes a big brother because the Works couple has 2 daughters. So he gets to, instead of being the youngest in the family, he gets to try his hand at being the big brother. And presumably life was good. I don't know, next to the Swift River. He did have some tough times. He lost one of his sisters in 1828, who passed away. 1830, the Works couple had their first son, Timothy Jr. He passed away as an infant. So Erasmus keeps working for Timothy on the farm until 1833. He turns 21. And he is now free to, as an adult, to go where he wants and do what he wants. So he wrote, in his words, were in full compensation for his labors from age 7 to 21, working on the farm. He got a cheap suit of clothes. That's what they left him with. So the money that he got from the inheritance for the sale of the land from his father was used presumably for his own welfare during his growing up years. So that was gone as well. So he has nothing in 1833, except a cheap suit of clothes and his work ethic. And so at this point, he goes through what a lot of young people even today go through at that stage of their life, trying to figure out what they want to do, right? So he knows farming, and he starts taking jobs with local farmers, and his pay initially was $12.50 per month. Did that for a while, then tried his hand at working in auger factory, which was in Ware. His job was to file and sharpen the augers. He did that for 2 years and decided that that was not for him, and went back to farming part-time, and this is where he picked up shoemaking. Still living in that Belchertown area. I thought before I got deep into this research, my assumption was that he didn't learn shoemaking until he came to North Brookfield. Turns out he did. There was no factories there, but the outwork system or the outputting system was where shoe factories would send wagon loads of leather in a horse-drawn cart to travel to area farms, give them the leather, they would work on their part of doing the shoes, and then the cart would come back and pick up the finished goods and take them back to the factory. This sometimes extended 2 or 3 towns out from the town of the factory. There was a shortage in labor. They needed as much help as they can get. So he did that. He became good at it. And between that and farming and his frugality, he saved a lot of money. But in 1837, there was a financial crisis in the country called the Panic of 1837, in which it was a depression of sorts. Many companies went out of business and many people lost lots of money. And the problem at the time was not like today where you do work and you're paid instantly or within a week or two for the work you do. Back then, everything was notes. So you would do work, say for a shoe factory, and you might not get paid for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. You'd get a note, a paper that said they owe you money. So when the panic hit, a lot of these companies went into bankruptcy. And if you had that piece of paper that said they owed you money, it was worthless. So Erasmus Haston in 1837 lost $600 because of this panic, this depression. I'm not sure how much he had left, but it was kind of like starting over from scratch. But he persevered and continued to work in farming and continued to be frugal and save money. And in 1839, he was able to buy his own farm in Greenwich, Mass, which I did find out during the course of this research is pronounced Greenwich and not Greenwich. I put this map up here just to show the relationship between Belchertown and Greenwich. You actually can't really read Greenwich, but it's to the right of Prescott where all that water is, where the Quabbin is now. At the time, it was not the Quabbin. It was good farmland and rivers, but you can see how it's basically just 2 towns away. Here is Greenwich now. Those hills were the high points of the land back before it was flooded. So he bought the farm, 300 to 400 acres, and lo and behold, it was next to the Swift River, the border of the Swift River. So he stayed with it all these years. So now I'm thinking, okay, he's going to go to North Brookfield, but there's no Swift River there. What's he going to do? And he started working the farm. And again, presumably life was good. Well, part of the reason he went to Greenwich was because his guardian father and mother had moved to Greenwich and bought a farm there. So he moved there and once again was close to them. The problem was in 1839, his guardian father died. And so once again, he loses another important person in his life. And I imagine because it was very shortly after this that he sold the farm and he came to North Brookfield, that he maybe just wanted to get away and had enough. So he sells his farm in Greenwich and he buys a farm in North Brookfield. This is on the Hillsville Road. The house is still there. It was 45 acres and he paid $1,400 for it. And just to give you some idea, if you see the church on the left side of this map, this is the 1830 map, a little bit earlier, but it's the best I could do. You see the Congregational Church there on the left side. If you go to that road just above it and you follow it to the right, the split is where School Street goes northeast. And then when you get up to the top of that, and there's another road that comes down, I believe that's Crooks Road. You go a little bit to the east of that, and it's very hard to read here, but there's a Bush is a farmhouse there on Hillsville Road, halfway between Crooks Road and Adams Road. Oh, I did. Yeah, actually used it. So let's see. So right about there. And he owned the land, his farmland pretty much encompassed the entire area between the Crooks Road and the Adams Road. 45 acres in total. And presumably was happy farming there. This was 1840. Shortly after this, he meets a local farmer's daughter who he becomes attracted to, and she to him. And they court each other and end up getting married. Her name is Abigail Whiting. Whoops. Yeah. And 1847, which is about the time, maybe slightly before he gets married to her, he sells his farm and buys another, which is where he is now, right about here. So again, we have School Street, now Elm Street comes down this way. His house that he bought is across the street from Whiting and a little bit further up. Right, and we have some pictures because that house is still here as well. It's on the corner of Arch Street and Elm Street. You may notice it if you pay any attention when you drive by there. It's got a barn attached. Yep, Olmsted Farm. And the land goes back behind. So we're going to talk in a minute about why I think that he decided to change farms. But before we talk about that, shortly after they move in, shortly after they're married, his wife dies. 1848. Now, this is out of all the people that have died so far that we've talked about, this is the first one that I know how they died, and it was tuberculosis, which was very common back then. So her gravestone is close to Erasmus in Walnut Grove Cemetery. I have to give a shout out to my friend Andy Karen. I charged him with trying to find where these gravestones were, and at first, after being there a couple times and walking around, he told me they're not there. I said, well, I know they're there. They're listed. It's listed in Temple's history that he's buried there. I said, keep looking. So a couple weeks later, he sent me all the pictures of the stones when he found them. But in any case, so she dies, and once again, he's by himself, but he has his farm. And of course, he has his newfound family. The Whiting family was a large family in North Brookfield. So he had many people to lean on, including the house across the street that I pointed to was Daniel Whiting, was his uncle. So not much time goes by, less than a year, he meets Elvira. And marries her. I want to say less than a year from the time his first wife died, he's married again. Now, Elvira, her maiden name was Shed, was from Vermont. And this is listed in Temple, and I'm thinking, well, how did Elvira Shed get to North Brookfield, or how did he get up? He wasn't a traveler. How did they meet? I'm probably never going to know, but wherever they met, they met. Well, then I find out Elvira had 4 sisters that were already living in North Brookfield when she got married in 1849. Most of them had been there for a while. So they were all born in Springfield, Vermont, and they all made their way down here. Probably once the first one did, then the other ones came and met their men and got married. So she was the 5th sister to marry a North Brookfield man. And when I thought about it, I'm thinking, wow, she probably had more blood relatives at their wedding than Erasmus did. All right, so in 1850, the North Brookfield tax records you can find online. They have Erasmus livestock listed because they were taxed on their livestock. He had one cow, and the way it was worded in the tax records, it was one fat cow.
Oh,
Which I'm guessing meant it was a pregnant cow, but maybe a shorthand way of saying that, but they called it a fat cow. So at this point, yes, he had a small farm. It was a downsize from his earlier farm. This one had 27 acres instead of 45. And one cow is not going to allow you to make a living. So, at this point, he was a shoemaker. When we look at the 1850 census, he's listed as a shoemaker. Most of his time was devoted to shoemaking. He worked at the big bachelor factory. And he was, number one, a hard worker. He was a highly skilled worker. But number two, he was a beneficiary of timing. In 1853 is the first time we see that the Bachelor factory is listed as the largest shoe factory in the United States. It probably was that way for some years beforehand, but that's the first time that I've been able to find that it was listed as such. Not to mention, in those early 1850 years, you have demand for more product. The shoe trade in the United States was, by and large, a domestic trade. Was very little trade with Europe or other countries. But America was growing fast, and the main reason for that was the great migration of Europeans, the Irish from the potato famine, the Germans were coming over in droves, and people were having lots of children, large families. And so the demand for shoes was ever growing, and the demand for labor for the shoe factories was ever growing. He was in the right place at the right time. His specialty field within the shoe factory was as a cutter. Cutters, basically their job was to take the raw leather or the tan and curry leather and cut out the patterns to make the heels, the soles, the uppers. And it was a highly specialized, highly skilled trade that there were a lot of people that were really good at. He was good at it. And so the factories were paying this position much higher than the other positions in the factory. Some of these guys that were good at cutting would be like hired hands. They would go to all the factories in town or in the other Brookfields, and whoever was paying the most at that time or whoever had the most demand for them, they would work for them. Rasmus was fairly loyal to the Bachelor factory. And I think this is a big part of the reason that he changed farms. So his new farm was very close, a very short walk from the Bachelor factory. So he could go there and work there and go home at night and not have too much walking travel time in between. Also, by changing farms from going to 45 to 27 acres, he didn't have so much to take care of on a farm. We have a half the size. So he's got less to worry about, so he can devote more of his time and attention to working with cutting the shoe leather. All right. Now, the owners of the Bachelor factory were the brothers Ezra and Tyler Bachelor. Ezra was the one that stayed in town. Tyler moved to Boston in the 1840s, and Ezra basically was the one that watched the local factory. He and Erasmus became close friends. And again, they were close neighbors. Ezra's house was where the current police station sits. So right next to the factory, very short walk from Ezra's house. Erasmus' house. Ezra was by far the wealthiest man in town. And interestingly enough, when Elvira died, I read through her will. Her and Erasmus had a portrait of Ezra Bachelor hanging in their parlor. And I remember thinking when I first learned that, like, how many people have a portrait of their boss hanging in their homes, right? So obviously there was a close relationship there. All right, so Erasmus and Eliza are newly married. They have two children. One is born in 1850 and dies in 1851. The cause of death, chylemic infection, which I looked up, was some sort of blood infection. Their second child was Arthur, and Arthur lasted a little bit longer than Martin, but not much longer. And after that, they had no more children. So they visited the graves often. Again, Walnut Grove Cemetery, not a far walk from their home up Elm Street. And they had pictures. She left pictures of Arthur in her will to some of her nephews and nieces. So apparently they had those in their house as well. So Erasmus goes on shoemaking through that whole heyday of the late 1840s and 1850s. He retires from shoemaking in 1861, most likely for a couple reasons. Anybody shout out a reason of what happened in 1861 that was important to the country? Right, so I put the blue and the gray up there to give you a hint. But when the Civil War came about, the Bachelor factory and the other factories in town lost a huge chunk of their business, which was the South. So no more business there. There's all of a sudden, instead of a shortage of labor, we have a glut of labor because we have less product to move. It would make sense, since the Union Army was in those early years growing rapidly, that they needed shoes. There was a, long story short, the original Secretary of War that Lincoln named was from Pennsylvania. He was very corrupt. His name was Simon Cameron. And he basically rigged the system so that Pennsylvania shoe factories would get all the contracts. The way he did it was part of the process of tanning leather and currying leather was to use tree bark. And he put in a stipulation that only certain type of tree bark, I don't remember what it was, could be used in the sale of the boots to the government for the army. And it was tree bark that was commonly used in Pennsylvania that was not used in Massachusetts. The Bachelors imported a lot of their leather from South America, and that tree bark was not there. And so they were shut out for a while. So the factories were only open a couple days a week, and a lot of people were laid off. And they were waiting for things to turn around. So it would make perfect sense that at that time Erasmus would say, you know what, I can get out of this and just go do my farming now. And I imagine that's what he did. The other factor was prior to 1861, shoe work was done by hand. In 1860, there was the advent of steam power coming through all these factories, and now they had sophisticated machines. And the skilled part of the labor was no longer so important, even for cutting. And so, but for those reasons, it was easy for Erasmus to get away from shoemaking, I'm sure, and just devote his time to farming. So they farmed. I'm just going to give you a snippet rather than go through the growth of his farm, and it's all there from the old tax records and the agricultural census records. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of 1880. The agricultural census. He had actually less than 27 acres of his farm at this point. We'll talk about that in a bit, but he owned land in other places that he farmed pieces of land, and sometimes he rented pieces of land. So you can see the acreage of tillage, the meadow acreage, 49 yards, 49 acres. A lot of that was devoted to his orchard. His farm value at that point was $8,000. Estimated value of his farm production per year was $800. And he was able to cultivate 17 tons of hay, had 3 milking cows, 9 other cows. You can see the gallons of milk, the butter, the eggs. Oh, by the way, chickens were not taxed back then. So I couldn't find out how many chickens he had, but obviously he had quite a few if he had 500 eggs a year. In any case, and then the Irish potatoes down the bottom. So these were his products of his farm, aside from his orchard. So his orchard, he had 70 apple-bearing trees. I think most of them were adjacent to his farmhouse. but I'm sure. These 70 apple-bearing trees produce 350 bushels of apples, which amounts to 42 pounds or about 120 medium-sized apples per bushel. Multiply that times 350. That's a lot of apples. And the value of the orchard products sold was $250 at that time. So so I went through I had extra time on my hands, which is rare, but I went through the entire agricultural census for North Brookfield that year. He was fourth of all the farmers in apple production in town at that time. Where he was number one was grapes. So Erasmus grew a lot of grapes, 250 pounds in total. Nobody else in North Brookfield sold grapes. Nobody else in Brookfield or East Brookfield sold grapes. There were a few in West Brookfield, but nowhere near to the amount that he sold. So all I can think about that is if people weren't doing it, it must have been really difficult to do, or maybe it was a really risky crop. And Erasmus wasn't afraid. And so hopefully he reaped some benefit from growing all those grapes. All right, this is a map from 1857. I don't know if you remember the 1830 map I had up earlier, but there were very few houses in this part of town. By 1857, there's quite a few houses. What I've got up there, if you can't grasp it, that same sort of split on the right half of the screen there, going up is School Street, going down is Elm Street. Just to the left of that, going straight down is Walnut Street. Walnut Street was not there in the 1830 map, but came in by this point. Arch Street is still not there. This is where, from everything I learned, he made a lot of his money. He sold house lots. So again, we're in the 1850s. This is before the Civil War. There's a boom. There's a tremendous demand for labor. There's a lot of people that are coming to the Bachelor Factory to work in it. And there's a lot of people that want to live close by, so they have a short walk. And Erasmus probably had a really easy time selling lots. And so he did sell lots. And he didn't, according to what I read, take advantage of anybody. They were sold for fair market price. But a lot of the houses that are down in that area now were built in that period between probably 1850 and 1860. And so made a lot of money that way. He also made a lot of money in real estate at this time by giving people mortgages. So the North Brookfield Savings Bank didn't come in till the mid-50s. And before that, people needed money to buy a property that they didn't have. They would go to people like Erasmus and say, hey, can I get a loan from you? And it was set up as a mortgage. And so if the person that bought it defaulted, that loan would go back to Erasmus. So he was patient because a lot of that wasn't paid off for 20 or 30 years. But with interest, he made a lot of money off mortgages and a lot of money off selling house lots. And I think more than anything, that's where he got the money to donate to the library. All right, so this is the 1878 Chesley map that a lot of you will know. Let's see if I can get this pointer going. So this is Erasmus House right here. So we have Elm Street coming down. Arch Street is in place by 1878. You can see, again, all these houses in this area that he would have sold. And this area was still farmland for him. And my sense is because whoever did this drawing, hopefully, had some accuracy here. It looks like we have trees set up in rows, and I'm wondering if maybe that wasn't the orchard where he had his 70 trees, and maybe the grapes nearby. I don't know. All right, and then we'll fast forward to 1898. Erasmus is dead at this point by a couple of years. But Elvira is still living in the home on the corner of Arch Street. And again, we can see all the other homes that are in the area. At this point, the train station is there on the tracks, and progress has been made in North Brookfield. All right, so the painting that's here in the library of Erasmus, I did not know there were other pictures of him until just today when I saw them sitting on the table over there. One with much less of a beard. we can appreciate, but, he acquired a lot of wealth. He was one of the wealthiest men in North Brookfield, according to the tax rolls, in his later years. But he was not one to be involved in public affairs. I think back in the 1850s, he served 1 year as an assessor. That's the only official position I was able to find that he served in. But he was an avid churchgoer and a very nice man. So when I read some of the testimonials to him, we get those same words: industry, frugality, economy, but we also get humble and kind, and on and on and on. He was an avid reader. Elvira was as well. Again, in her will, we see this in that she left a lot of books to her nieces and nephews, and she would pick which titles went to which nieces and nephews. And obviously, these are the ones that were most special to them. They donated another chunk of books to the library itself. She also included, she left mottos in her will, which often were religious, to her nieces and nephews. I remember one was, "Cling to thy cross. I leave to my nephew Edwin the motto, cling to my cross." So I don't know that people do that very often. I thought that was kind of interesting that she was that thoughtful to do that. And then here is Elvira. You can see her picture there as well. Erasmus dies in a couple of years after that the library opened, I think 1896, if I remember right. And the words given to describe his cause of death are le grippe, French term. I looked it up. It's the flu. So apparently he had other medical issues as well, but he got the flu, and that's what finished him. And Elvira lived for another 10 years and died of complications she fell and fractured her hip and died shortly after. The house was left to her nephew, was it Roland? Last name was Doan. And so that's the family that lived in that house from that point forward. I'll leave it to the Vermont people to talk about that part of things, but I also saw in her will the portion where she wanted to leave money so that they could have a library up in Franklin as well. That's the end of the presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. No, great. All right, beautiful. All right. I'm gonna work my way out of here and we'll move ahead. Oh, you all, that was fun. I'll leave that there. Okay. Excellent job. Thank you. With my connection. Probably a good idea.
Your laptop's okay. I don't know if I've got the right adapter for a Mac. Thanks. That never occurred to me. Thanks.
The other projector is downstairs, but I think that has a few different.
To say that I'm a bit of a novice is to put it mildly.
HDMI, right? Is there none on the other side? Yeah. So there are other cords. Do you have another cord that will fit in that will connect into a projector?
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
So I'll disconnect this. And
Thank you,
can
sir.
Try
We'll
and
just change it over.
figure
Awesome.
out.
Nicely
Yeah,
done, by the way.
Plenty of this there. But Andrew,
You answered many questions that were on my list. So
Oh, great.
thank you for making my research a bit easy.
Well, now you're just playing. Yeah.
This side. Interesting.
Yeah. Put it in there.
Macs are a whole different breed.
I think we're the worst. That's a great question. I don't know. Because it's one of these things that should be. What you saying? Josh, and well, I'll change for that. Just to get you one of the type machines that we put in, I think they're very neat, they switched a lot. So it's for them. Or you plug into the rest of them. There's a weekend, and I remember we used to. All right. A few things from that. Yes. Sure. Thank you.
Teamwork going on. Don't be afraid of a stretch break. You folks have had a chance to get some good info. What was your email, good sir? Zuzi, ELLELJIM
At Yahoo.
I would never refer to you as you. You said it was unfair.
Forever.
I'm in the same place. I have an old Hotmail account.
Yeah.
There we go. Good. Thank you.
If you don't move your line. Okay. So. Well. Yeah. They have. Absolutely. Yes, because it was.
Oh, how do I not have a connection with it?
No.
Is there a library person here? Hey, Diane. I use the hotspot one. Is there a better one to use?
Yeah.
Cause it connected me and then it kicked me out, so.
Okay.
Is that the one to use? You're a mouse person. It comes up, let's hope it stays. Then I just was going, trying to get my mail, he said he emailed me. That would be a problem. Yes, like it was now. Is there a, oh no, okay, no password. All right, so let's see if it comes up now. Beautiful.
Yay, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Right. Teamwork, I love it. You may be one of the most tenacious researchers I know.
Yeah, because trying to find buildings have names on the front. Yeah. They do not have deep fonts. I know. I know. It's been a challenge for the things. Yeah. You don't have to be. And all those things. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've been here.
So I kind of know how to do it.
I wonder, because you.
Thank you. Have a change of access. Thank you. I hope you all are enjoying intermission. Continue to talk among yourselves. We've got a good old fashioned team effort going. I am not good with technology, to put it mildly. I started with chalkboards and I miss them. They are reliable. The bulb does not burn out. The signal does not go away. So again, thanks for your patience. And we do have some delightful maple bars, courtesy of my colleague, Michelle. So if you have not tested those out, I would encourage you to do so. So we are an hour. Wow. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we got it.
Yes, I am. Family to get up there. You get they do this and then they get that. How many days? And you would have been working. The brain is standard gate. So they had a 15 mile. Is the most of the same. How's it looking?
Good.
Thank you so much.
Should I get the notes up?
I'm sorry?
The notes on here for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. Awesome. And I can get by without that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Awesome. So let's go to. These my advance. Because I'm a little further in than I should be. There we go. All right. Can I, let's we just sit here? Good, because I can't work with my back to do that. All right. Once again, thank you for the kind invitation. I'm Brian Rainville. I very much grew up in the Haston Library. My mother missed a town meeting and discovered she was now a town auditor. They knew in her years before she married, she had been a typist at IBM in the financial division, where the plaque on her typewriter was about this long, and she specialized in the financial paperwork. So she would take her portable typewriter and set up in the town clerk's office in the left-hand corner of the Haston Library, and I would go across the hall to the Haston Library. There was one beautiful room, and I would sit there and read. And it was a magical, magical place for me. So this morning, myself and Josh, our librarian, and my colleagues from 2 different schools that I have the pleasure of working with, left Franklin, Vermont. I live next door to the United States Customs.
Oh, wow.
All right, so I can truly see Canada from my house. All right. Franklin County is in Franklin, Vermont. What is our claim to fame? The northernmost action of the Civil War went through our town with a bank raid in St. Albans that financed a plot that killed Lincoln. That was St. Albans money. Otherwise, we are a sleepy, quiet little border town. I wanted to cross the border yesterday, but I couldn't do it legally because the station closes at 4 o'clock. But as you approach the American border, there is a sign on the Canadian side that says frontier. All right, I love that. So there we are in the upper left-hand corner of Vermont. We are an hour north of Burlington or 25 minutes south of Montreal. Okay, you can't get much further north and still be there. We are home to Lake Carmi, which is very much our claim to fame. We have about 1,600 people in town until Memorial. And then 254 cottages come to life. And we have families that have been summering on our lake longer than many of our year-rounders have lived in town. And that's one of the great pleasures. I do some oral history interviews with my colleagues in the Historical Society. We sat down last year with a young woman in her late 90s who's been coming to the lake since she was an infant and gave us great stories. So as a historian, as a teacher, as a director of theater, I'm drawn to stories. And that was part of the fun of today's invitation because we got to dig deeper. One of my great questions about the Haston is over the door, it says Haston Library. But we didn't know a lot about Electra. Elvira. She's very much extinguished from living memory. Her home was here. Her community was here. Her relatives were there and her memories were there. And when you start delving into memory, it's an interesting journey. To show you where our library is, it is on a prominent lot, corner lot, the fire station here, some beautiful elderly housing, the general store here. Franklin has 1 block. You have to time your Memorial Day parade very carefully because the front and the back should not meet. It has happened a few times. All right. When Elvira Haston made that magnificent gift, Dr. J.B. Hall and his wife moved to their house. Their house was here. They sold 2/3 of their lot to the town of Franklin, moved their house and barn back. Our post office is now in here. It looks like something out of the Newhart show. Okay. And this beautiful brick, slate, and granite edifice took shape. The only building in our town in that time period designed by an architect. Thank you. We are as Rockwellian as you can get. I feel like I'm with the Franklin Tourist Bureau for the next couple of moments, so please bear with me. We have a significant number of historic dairy barns. If you look carefully, they started as sheep barns, they became dairy barns as the industry moved along. This family got a preservation grant and was able to keep that barn whole. When I went to school, there were 9 Rainville farms. Today, 3 have cows. 3 operate as dairy farms, as I knew. So I've seen that consolidation that you talked about with industry and shifts, and it's been really brutal. Our historical society is headquartered in an 1878 squared log cabin. And standing in this building right now, in which our log cabin would easily fit, that contrast is rather striking. You have a stunning Victorian building with its brass and its stained glass and its gorgeous woodwork. And some of our citizens in the 1870s were still building log cabins. So again, we're the frontier. Upper right-hand corner is our church green. That building to your far right is our townhouse, 1870s, our town hall, where our Memorial Day program, if you look at the agenda from 1880, it's the same one we do today. If you want to hear the battle hymn of the Republic, done well, come visit us on Memorial Day. Well, it's part of the reason I'm in this business. You sit there with faux marble painted plaques on the wall, and you are hearing the same music that your great grandparents heard right after the war ended. And the impact on our town is massive. 122 young men went off to fight in the war. More than 20 didn't come back. And that was devastating for a community of our size, and it'll help you understand why some folks went elsewhere. Some discovered, and I hate to let the secret out of the bag, there were parts of this country where there was no snow. And they went west, and some came south with industry. All right. The earliest church up here dates to the 1820s, the meeting house, which I knew as the Congregational Church, shared by 5 or 6 different denominations. The massive Methodist church with a town clock from the 1920s, she's still hand wound. It's a memorial gift to a young man who tragically lost his life. We have one of 2 independent telephone companies in the state. It has been Franklin Telephone Company since shortly after Graham Bell. Okay, and the folks who climb the poles are direct descendants of the people who created the company. During the pandemic, my school shut down. We were sent home, and they said, "Don't worry, you can do it by Zoom." And I said, "But I don't have internet." And everyone looked at me. I didn't have internet at home because then I could leave school at school and keep home at home. So I sent an email off to Kim Gates Maynard and said, "Kim, I need internet at the house at Franklin." And she replied, she said, "Hey, I'm in the airport in Tucson and I can't do it today, but is tomorrow okay?" And I felt such relief because my local company said, "Yeah, in 7 weeks we can get you wired up." So during the pandemic, I taught from my living room. It was one of the more surreal experiences I've had. As a historian, I'm used to seeing history through this. So that was it. There's Lake Carmine. I snagged this photo from a realtor and you can see why.
Yeah.
It is the 4th largest lake in Vermont. It's in a limestone basin. It has been a place for summer folks from Boston and Montreal and New York City since really the mid-Victorian period, starting with tents, gingerbread cottages, and we've got this wonderful architectural mix from our year-rounders, where if you have a septic system and a well, you can live there all year, to folks, my favorites were the Everests from Pennsylvania, a really sweet couple. Bob was a World War II veteran. Their camp was on piers, and they would come up in May, and if the frost hadn't let go and they couldn't open the front door yet, seriously, they drove back to Pennsylvania and tried again in a couple of weeks. They were some of my favorite people because Bob's father worked in the advertising business. Their entire living room was paneled in vintage travel posters. How you grow up in this world and not become a historian, I don't know. Okay, I grew up on a dairy farm. I'm allergic to the whole thing. I love it, but the cattle, the feed, the dust, it's not my world. My great aunt's farm with a stone house on the other side of the lake. So we're dairy, we're commuters, we're families who've been there. Well, my people are recent, and we got there in 1909. Can I switch to the next one, Melissa? Thank you. So here is the Haston Library, the glass plate photograph taken shortly after construction. You can see Dr. Hall's house back here in its new location. We had as many as 5 doctors practicing in town at various points, most of them locals. Okay, and here's the Haston as I took the photo yesterday. She is a gem. We have a slate roof again because in the 1980s, our building committee said, wow, asphalt's expensive. For the heck of it, let's price slate. The price came in lower. So she's again wearing a slate roof. We have this wonderful colonial revival detail. All the architectural styles that you have on Main Street are kind of smushed together to create this building. And I love it dearly. We found the original lantern cleaning years ago during the reno, got that back up. She's in remarkable shape. And over the door, it says in letters this high, Haston Library. But as a kid, I found this very confusing because you walked in and the Haston Library was the one room on your right. It was 1/7 of the floor space. Across the hall, you had the town clerk. She had the vault with the town documents. You had a very 19th century room over here because the door said selectman's room and still smelled of cigar smoke.
Oh.
Okay. Upstairs, you had the history room that was closed off that had really cool frosted glass windows. And in the basement, if you went down the steps and turned right, there was frosted glass and the door said customs inspector. My friends, you were on the honor system if you crossed the border. Any little country road was open. There were about 14 of them across the northern boundary of my town. And you were expected to cross the border and go to the town of Franklin and report at the Haston Library. Until 1934, when the customs station was built next to my house. What I discovered was the selectmen were pretty crafty because they charged the government $200 a year in rent, which starting in 1908 was a pretty significant amount of money. So they found a way to generate some money with this. But then I also found that they kind of played fast and loose because what the will said was a library. And what they built was a municipal building. And it always bothered me, and we'll come back to that in just a moment, because here's the phrase, all the rest and residue of my estate, both real and personal, I give, devise, and bequeath to the town of Franklin, Vermont, to be expended by said town in the erection of a public library building. Not a town office, not a customs office, not a history room, a public library. And you know, there's a certain danger in being the town historian. You can say more when you're not in town than when you're there. This is one of these moments because I thought, Mrs. Haston was very clear. She didn't say to the town of Franklin, Vermont, period and stop. She said for a public library. All right, and this is the point where I invoke the faith tradition of my choice and hope everything works out. Thanks, Melissa.
Am I still on battery? Am I not plugged in?
Oh, maybe that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Here we go. We got it.
We got
We got it.
Other side.
We're sad.
Awesome. I often felt the same way in early public speaking. It's terrifying, but you're all a wonderful audience.
That's a log back in problem.
That really confused me. Over the door, it said Haston Library, but inside. So I went to the town rules. And the town reports are pretty skeletal, but the annual warning was really revealing because starting at about 1904, my grandfather was 2, there's a phrase in there that said, what will the town do regarding space for the clerk? And there's nothing in the minutes, and there's nothing said the following year. And a year later, they said, will we lease or buy? So, ooh, we're moving in a direction. And nothing happened. And then the next year, almost the same article exactly is in the warning. What will the town do? And they did nothing. And 3 months later, they find out that Mrs. Haston has left them a lot of money. And we know what they did. They said, well, it has a library in it. And we have this wonderful plaque. I used to walk in as a kid and have to look up because this was on the most prominent wall. It's Gorham, it's bronze. They didn't fool around. To make it even prettier, they ringed it with quarter songbook. This library building was bequeathed to the town of Franklin by Elvira S. Haston, 1816 to 1906. And I love this Edwardian phrase that follows. As a permanent reminder of the affectionate regard. What a wonderful phrase. Of the affectionate regard she cherished for the home of her early childhood. And in commemoration of this fact, this tablet is erected 1907. So they put a Gorham plaque to honor her. They put her name and they put her name over the front door, but they didn't quite follow through. Which is why we found Elvira. I also speak on the Shelburne Museum founder. I'm a guide there as well, have been for quite a few years. And that's Electra and this is Elvira. So sometimes they cross. Pardon me if they do. We found Elvira's portrait cleaning the attic, where she was accompanied by 2 other men. We now know that's Erasmus and her father. But at some point, those beautiful photos in fumed oak frames with gold liners ended up in the attic. And as a historical society and as a community, we were asking questions. Who is Mrs. Haston? What is this legacy? How did someone from here, which is a nice drive today in 2025, especially when you're being driven and you can kind of nod off. How does this all connect? Thank you, Melissa. Well, I grabbed the wheel. And boy, your system's different than mine. We're countywide. I know how it works. Folks were really sweet and they're like, so here's the office you need to call. And they said, okay, we're backed up. It'll take us a little while. And they photocopied the will for me and sent it along for the Worcester Probate and Family Court. And I was expecting 3/4 of a page. I got an 8-page laundry list that is genealogy, sentiment, and memorial all rolled into one. And after your presentation, good sir, I now understand who a lot of those nieces and nephews were, because those names did not seem familiar in my community. These did. Gates, Gilbert, Hubbard, Sheds. They've been in Franklin since Noah, more or less. Okay, these are the folks that are Franklin Telephone. They were Franklin Electric. Her great nephew, the governor, was a Gates because his mother was a Shed, who was Elvira's niece. Okay, these folks chartered the town. They won't talk about the fact that they were smugglers and horse thieves. I live next door to their farm. Okay, but we always had Elvira S. Haston. I'm like, S? What is she, Truman? Harry S. Truman. He said, what's it stand for? It's just an S. I'm like, what does that mean? Got into the genealogy, got into the will, and realized she is a Shed, S-H-E-D-D, an old Franklin name. Okay. So that had 39 bequests. It is a remarkable document. As someone who works with the 18th century, I'm used to that. I'm not in the early 20th century. So books, and yeah, she picked out the title and she decided who would have it. Her Bible, her religious mottos. There are 7 or so in that. That's a lot. And I thought, whoa, she's either trying to convert folks, or this speaks to who she is and what she believes. And we're across the street from what she believed. That's her church over there. And I thought, okay, what's her church about? Because she joined late, 1858. My people, it's right after birth, were baptized and you're in the door, congratulations. That church was committed to justice, instruction, and charity. I thought, thank you. I have a better understanding of who you were and what you believed. Instruction, there's an old Victorian idea. I personally, as part of this community, need to do something to improve this community. And I have to say, walking in this morning and seeing your mosaic tile and your chandeliers and your woodwork, what a message this building sent when its doors first opened to everyone who walked through the door. And we always think of Andrew Carnegie as building libraries. You know, I always ask my students, was he the king of steel or the king of steel? All right, you can play that both ways. It's like Henry Clay Frick, and my kids love this. They're like, were Frick and Carnegie really a partnership? And I know what they're trying to say. They're running the words together, they're having a little fun. But we think of these titans of industry for creating these places, and it's often a very different story, which again was illuminated so well. I didn't know about the orchards, the real estate, and of course, mortgages before the GI Bill or any of those agencies. You often had to have 50% down payment to approach a bank, and the term was 5 years. So the bulk of us, we couldn't get anywhere near a mortgage. So we go to her will, and it's her books, her Bible, her mottos, and then a phrase that I saw for the first time in the will, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And in her hand, it is written, "The rest and residue of my library." I thought, oh, I get it. She loved books. She saw opportunity, enlightenment. In early New England, you approach a village, and it was today. We're coming down through, and I don't know your town well, but suddenly the steeple looms into view. And then I see the school. And that's the twin legacies of early New England. The Puritans believing you needed both of those institutions to live well and get to a more comfortable place thereafter, if you all follow. Okay? So the will tells me a lot more of who she is. And I love that library phrase because not only did she say the rest and residue of my library, she said, you will pack it and send it to my great grand nephew. I thought, whoa, you will pack it and send it. She means business. And I could feel marching orders. You could see that she knew exactly what she wanted. And if I had a time machine and could go back to the 60s and 70s in my hometown, I could have found some of those books and some of those religious mottos and those silver teaspoons that were engraved Elvira. How we would love to have one of those next to our plaque. Unfortunately, they're gone. Thanks, Melissa. Genealogy, or as I like to say, hooray for the internet. I can work with archives. It's tough. It's vision, it's time, and when you're directing 2 or 3 shows a year and teaching a full slate of classes and restoring a historic house and helping folks with theirs, you don't have a lot of time. So findagrave.com. It's where I started out. I knew it was early, 1860 for me, it's 4 years after the War of 1812. She passes in 1906. I didn't realize the scope of the family, 10 siblings. I come from a large family. My father's oldest brother, when he and his wife married, she's 95 today, they had 12 children. His oldest sister, when she married, they went one better and they did 13. 10 children. Zachariah Shedd, born here in Massachusetts before the American Revolution. Before the American Revolution. And Lydia Proctor. And these folks are a hoot to research because they use the same names each generation. And I know that spirals from some of my local families. But man, it took a little work. But once I realized S stood for Shed, I knew she grew up across the street from this, which is the house I bought in April to save it. This is Brown's Corner, the Brown family home, built 1855. The sawmills are over here. The Baptist church is here. And Elvira would have lived on the farm right here. Her nephew, Squire, enlisted in the Civil War as a musician. And as a very young student, I discovered we had his Civil War kepi, tuning fork, and handwritten sheet music in the Historical Society collection. And I thought, how wonderful. Who are his descendants? And then I realized he had none because he died in service. So Elvira, like so many Americans, lives side by side with loss. It's a constant part of her experience. But her sister, off on that side, we get down to Governor Gates, who leads us along. The marriage, I didn't find a lot except a name, and I thought Erasmus, right out of the Renaissance or Renaissance. And I thought a man of learning and scholarship. And yes, because we're in that building, this roof over our heads, which hopefully will soon improve. I'm sorry to learn that. This roof is to shelter a community devoted to learning. What a magnificent thing. And the heartbreak of losing both children. We're headed to the cemetery later. We want to see those headstones because they have some very long inscriptions that don't show up well on the internet. I can zoom and move, but even with these, it's work. Thanks, Melissa. All right. So why a Haston Library in Franklin? Well, Vermont has 251 towns, which is incredibly inefficient, but a lot of fun and filled with character. And I can tell you about the characters in my town, but I see that camera over there and I'm not going to do it right now. All right. Of our 251 towns, there are 185 libraries, public libraries. These are not school libraries. These are freestanding buildings. Ours started in the general store. It was a subscription library. Local citizens bought the books, you signed out, and away you went. And that's how it operated until this woman from Massachusetts that we didn't know much about gave us a library. 92 of those are memorial libraries. They are dedicated to a person, a family, and what a legacy. 7 generations of people in my community have now walked under that magnificent granite block that says Haston. What a legacy. Man, if I had to pick a headstone, I'll take that any day. A living, breathing memorial. About 25 years ago, Josh, some walls came down. The town clerk's office was moved down into the basement, the furnace room, as we knew it years ago, with all its connotations. It's where our children's programming happened. It was the largest room inside. Stamp, and it was painted hospital green, but by God, we learned a lot. And it was an essential part of my childhood. They moved the town clerk's office down, and the library got the whole first floor. Instead of a seventh of the building, they had almost a half. That's a win. When I was a kid, there was a Titanic style gate that closed here with a padlock that I think was original. And that was the library with its fireplace, a wing chair, and a little oak single pedestal desk that had a woman about this tall, totally devoted to that space, and was the longest serving librarian in the history of our community, almost 3 decades, Vera Riley. So let me have any book I wanted. And when discards happened, the complete set of Dickens was on the rack. I've still got it and I cherish it. They took the wall down here. This was the town clerk's office, and that was the selectman's room. All right, and opened that first floor up. And it worked pretty well, but as you can see, things are getting a little tight today. It's getting a little claustrophobic. Thanks, Melissa. 1984, the children's room, that 3rd floor historical room that had never really been used, was cleaned out and renovated and painted. And suddenly we had a rug over the hardwood and we had beanbag chairs. It was a new discovery for a farm kid, let me tell you. And we had our own space. We weren't sitting on the steps on the way in anymore reading or on the hearth of the fireplace. We had our own room thanks to the donation of a local couple who'd lost a son during the Vietnam conflict. Those kind of gifts moved me as a historian and as an American because they again dug in to shape their community. And I went to school with their son, who in junior high had the most beautiful leather jacket. And it was the pilot's jacket his uncle had. And Dan carries that name. seeing that evolution was fascinating. We were using every inch of the building possible, but we weren't quite there. Thank you, Melissa. So town clerk went downstairs, took the sign from the old vault, popped it up on top. Didn't have a vault in the basement where we had to keep the door open because the documents would mold. Yeah. But still have a double pedestal desk that was bought new for the office that every town clerk has been at since 1908. Before that, the town clerk had their office. When you were elected, get your mind around this. When you were elected, you set up the town clerk's office in your house. And you moved the vital records into maybe your dining room. And you did business there. And that's the way things worked until the Haston was built. But when I got the will and saw the language, because the town history pretty much has the stuff from the plaque. We had a wonderful group that wrote that book, but they wrote it out of living memory. And they hadn't seen the will. And when I saw the will and realized, hold it, the whole building is supposed to be the library. I went to my friend who's the chair of the select board and said, Dave, we have a problem. And Dave said, Brian, what's going on? And I said, well, I think the library could evict the town from the Haston. Let me tell you, it's a way to get his attention because Dave's eyes got about this big. And we were off and running. And the question became now, okay, if the Haston is outgrowing their part of their building, and the town needs more room because our vault only has room left for 2 more books, which means births, deaths, and marriages really need to slow down. We're still paper-based by law. We have to have paper copies. It also means we're going to have to reduce land sales. So folks, just hang on. We realize that we have some problems here. But across the street, one of our neighbors was getting ready to move. She said, the house is too big, and I'd like the town to have it. Now, she was not in a position to give it to us, but she had it appraised, and she picked a number. And I said, Jackie, how'd you pick the number? And she said, well, it's pretty easy. That's what my new house costs. So last October, the select board decided I would be the sacrificial lamb. And I stood before the citizens of Franklin, some of which had known me, most of which had known me since I was in diapers, and said, we don't own the library. And I looked around and realized the doors were there, and only the bathroom was behind me, and this might go badly. And the people in my hometown were magnificent because they were shocked and they were a little angry. And then they quickly realized that what Mrs. Haston gave us was a magnificent gift that had been misused, and we needed to make the situation right. So without an engineering report on the house, without a historic report on the house, they voted to use all our community's ARPA money to buy the house. Now, my grandfather had a way to describe that type of transaction where you don't do your homework and you make a big leap. But there are women in the room, so I won't use the phrase. I'm now the chair of that committee to figure out whether that house can indeed hold our town offices. It is the Green Sampson Luce Manse. It has 3 names now because the Greens built it. They own the neighboring store, now home to the telephone company. It is the Sampson Manse because Dr. Sampson lived in that house and practiced medicine in that house. And if you went through the side door, you were in his waiting room. And if you went into a room about this big, that was his consulting room. And it is the Luce house because it was Jackie's home for many years. She and her husband owned the general store for a period of time, and she lived in that house for approximately 60 years. Don't tell her I said that. It is built like a tank. It is brick, it is Greek revival, and it is not balloon framed. It is post and beam. And when you look at where the roof and the plate join, those beautiful hand carved beams, and then there's additional beams that run back at a 45. If we ever have a flood of biblical proportions, I'm going to that house because she's going to float and she'll be just fine. It is built like a tank. You walk through the front door, there is a double parlor with a carved white marble fireplace and a big archway into the dining room and a big archway into the kitchen because Jackie took the pantries apart, opened the ceiling to the rafters, cathedraled it, put some skylights. put in a stove that she could bake 6 pies at a time because she and her husband did farmers markets. And I walked in for the first time and I said, oh, meeting and conference room, nice round table for land records, put the clerk back there. That garage over there we'll have to demo because it's underbuilt, but we can excavate, pour the concrete, put the vault there, reframe it like it was, and we have a town clerk's office. And the people of Franklin said to the board collectively, and those of us working with them at the request, interesting idea, cost it up. So this morning before I got in the car, I was there with the carpenter, looking at the wraparound front porch, which has had better days. But that house has stood since 1850. It has cast iron lintels with a foliate design. There's only 3 houses in town. I own one of the others. It is a full 2 stories. Behind the louver is the original triangular window with its wavy glass. It is a time capsule. And I am so excited that we have it because it's on an acre and it's here and the library's here. And for the first time, the Haston Library could have parking for more than 3 cars. Now, we had parking for more than 3 cars originally because something called the town tub was in the intersection, which is where you tied your horse up so it could drink while you did business with the local merchants. So we've got this beautiful long lot that we can have parking to serve both buildings. We can have green space. And folks are coming on board. There's still some folks who aren't sure, some of whom are quite vocal. That is their right. God bless the First Amendment. But we're working up the possibilities to make sure Elvira has her home. And we have a place to interpret this history that we're learning more about, thanks to a big collaborative effort. So if we move the town clerk and treasurer, suddenly the listers aren't working on the same table that the lawyers are working on for title searches, and the town treasurer could have a confidential conversation with a landowner, which is less fun for the rest of us in town. We had a switchboard into the Kennedy administration. We had the last switchboard in Vermont. We still had wooden phones with cranks. And Ruth Toof, our loyal switchboard operator for more than half a century, saved some lives and made things easier because you'd pick it up and say, hey, Ruth, can you connect me with Imogene? And she said, no, you don't want the house. I just saw her go in the store. I'll ring her there. It is a town where if you're born there, everybody knows who you are and you know they're watching. Talk about a way to the straight and narrow. I didn't need to cling to the cross because I knew that everybody in town knew who I was. And my God, what a great place to grow up. I was lucky. And part of that is Elvira's legacy. Part of that is the foresight to create that space that brings us together. The Ford car dealership across the road that closed is now a pub. And it's not a place to go to drink. It's a place to listen to live music. It's a place to paint and sip if you prefer to drink a little bit. It's a place for a trivia night. It's a place to create art. I'm watching my community redefine itself. So we've got something that we're really excited about. And I hope after town meeting next year, I'm still excited about. Because if I smell warm tar and I see a pillow being ripped apart, I'm out of there. Thanks. Let's go to the next slide. All right. The Haston Library today. Here's Josh's desk. You can see that we have a luxurious amount of space in which to perform all our essential functions. When I was a kid, there was a wall here, the plaque, that was the town clerk's office. That original lantern's one of my favorite things. We had it lovingly restored about 20 years ago when that major work was done by your predecessor, Sue Clark, who led that renovation. And I would be amiss today if I didn't mention Sue, who gave her heart and soul to that. 2024, we had 3,220 books moved. That may not seem that exciting until you realize there's 1,400 people in town. Book circulating, patron visits, 1,223 people went to programming, which needless to say, we can't host at the Haston. It happens on the lawn, it happens up in a community room at the senior housing, or it happens up at our town hall. And 1,075 people used Wi-Fi, and I was among those early on because more than 15 years ago, my parents got a little letter from the Department of Defense explaining that they were going to take 10.5 acres of their farm for a new border port, $15.4 million. And I needed internet and I needed it fast. So I drove to the Haston and I did what I did as a kid. I sat in front steps. This time I had a laptop and I had Google and I had email, and away we went. It has been wild. Today there's 7 trustees in the institution. And if you know their last names, you know who they were related to among the original trustees and building committee. We are well rooted. And these folks take their responsibility very, very seriously. And as I said earlier, when the seasonal cottages open, about 245 of them around the lake, things really get busy in Franklin. Unless we time that parade right. Okay. Lake Carmi, the 4th largest lake entirely in the state, 1,375 acres. I'm lucky. We have the lake in the middle. The early Vermont historian Zadok Thompson said something about my town that I love. The township is very much injured by a large pond. I have to imagine Mrs. Haston coming back later in life to see that lake. Perhaps renting one of those cabins, certainly visiting with her relatives at Brown's Corner, who were still there into, well past her lifetime, into the 1960s, the last of the Shedd family. So the connections for us are really deep. She did all this on $12,000. And our building committee brought it in for just over 10. The rest went in an endowment, which continues to grow. People have been exceedingly generous. It may be 10 or 20. It may be 5,000. We've had some folks who've gone big. And we're really lucky because they keep us going. And they're there. And the place is wonderfully busy. Thanks, guys. I took these shots yesterday. I wanted you to see Dave Pratt, our local photographer, a man of immense skill, who goes over and teaches photography at the elementary school and exhibits at the Haston. So our students walk into our town library and they see their work on the wall. Pretty darn wonderful. One of our youth programs in process, I think that's Jen doing back there in holiday sweater. Yeah, one of our local teachers. Town Hall, or our townhouse, has a historic painted curtain, dates from the 1870s, a wonderful space. And this tall gentleman, our current librarian and our driver today, and our library director, okay, Josh Warman. So we are so indebted to Mrs. Haston's foresight, to her gift. And our goal, I think, as a community, almost without exception, is to make sure that her library will be exclusively her library. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions. Yes, sir.
So in the course of my research, everywhere I looked, it was Springfield. She was from Springfield, her parents were from Springfield. She went to marry, her marriage to her atmosphere behind Springfield. And then I see in her will that she's giving money to Franklin. Can you explain?
I'll do my best. So she's born in Springfield, Vermont, but the family moves up to Franklin. Okay, and that's where things happen. And it doesn't look like she's there for long, but it very much shapes her early life. And that's why she circles back to it. Because when I start doing the genealogy, her family, her immediate family, marries into all those major families in town. So she is linked by blood and memory and that community. And that's something we kind of see play out. I can't talk about a major gift yet that's coming to our community from some of our longtime folks who could have left it anywhere and instead sent it to a place that became their adopted hometown. We are just so lucky. Her father is buried in our Main Street Cemetery, right next to my childhood church, my family church, our community, one of our community churches. Many of her other relatives are there as well, and Squire is there. He was brought home. So yeah, it's interesting for me because they go from Massachusetts to Springfield, Vermont to almost Canada, and then down to this wonderful place. Yeah, it's, you know, as a historian, I know the story is complicated and complex, but what a ride. What fun to go down the rabbit hole. And I appreciated the assignment because I had an excuse to go down the rabbit hole. And seeing the goodies on the table over it. An original copy of the dedication address, an original copy of the photograph. How wonderful that you have those things. I'm still waiting for that family that calls and said, hey, Brian, we found this box. Because when our library was renovated and we had to completely remove it, the town clerk would call about every week. And Martha Jane was so sweet. And she called once and I could hear it in her voice. I said, it's a big box, isn't it? She said, yeah. I said, okay, I'll be right down. And I get down there and on her desk is this Electrolux vacuum box. It's big, it's deep. I said, Martha Jane, what do you got? She said, just look, Civil War pay receipts. From the entire war. Along with the original records of the Grand Army of Republic Post, of all their members, all their expenditures, and the date of death for each of their members. That's the kind of place I live in. And I'm so lucky because when the phone rings, I never know. Melissa, can I backtrack that? Thanks. I want to go back to that photo of Brown's Corner. Don't worry about the lights. Nope, a little further. Thank you. Keep going. There we go. I bought that at auction in 1993. Because I saw some of our community history being dispersed. Folks loved our town for auctions because our families had been there 150, 200 years. So the tents went up and arms went in the air and I sat on my hands because suddenly people were paying lots of money for things and they were leaving. But we're really lucky that folks are pretty good at recognizing what tells the essential story and making sure it comes to us. And Elvira's hanging over the fireplace today. She's back up there. We had her conserved. She's behind museum glass. She's double matted. There isn't a board on the back leaching wood acid into her. We had a donor who said, Elvira looks like she needs some help. And off to the conservator she went. And that's part of what I love. So again, I'm hoping that in March at town meeting, I get a similar response when we have numbers on renovating that building and strengthening both of those institutions. We'll see. Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. This is a once in a generation. When they got that gift, Dr. Hall said, hey, let's put it here. At the intersection of three major roads. There's only three major towns. Three major roads in our town, really. We'll be honest here. Let's put it in the most prominent place we can. So it's been intentional, it's been thoughtful, it's been pretty magical. Yes.
I was interested to learn that there was a building on your site,
Yes.
because the same thing is true here.
Well, I wondered what was across the street from the church? What was here?
A home,
Ah,
I think it was Robert Batchelor.
Yeah.
Of the factory.
oh, the irony.
And that house is roughly a block away now.
So they moved it?
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I wondered driving up, because I'm looking at the development pattern on that side of the street. And this was not a vacant lot.
No.
Thank you. You folks have been fabulous. Any other? You're welcome to catch me for cookie time after. Be quick though, there's only 2 left.
I also want to mention that as you folks file out, we just got a wonderful donation of a spoon, an original spoon from the Haston Library, this Haston Library, dedication. So if you'd like to take a look at that, it's fine enough. And thank you again so much for coming here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. When I was president of the dairy farm, everybody on the farm. And we're really starting not long after that, it became the commute. So you're working in Burlington, you're working in St. Albans. We have some folks who work from home today online. A lot of folks who work for the Border Patrol, work for Customs and Immigration or the office space. But we very much need a community.
Right, now, we thought that for a Cape Verde, Frank, it's our daughter, and her family here, thank God, so we did 3 hours.
Well, I know that.
But there was other things like the great mayor down came here in the 1940s. Shoe factory, he sold factory.
Sure.
Well, they used for Polish and things for it. So they used several here.
Yeah, my grandmother used to be